I am a huge fan of pairing a cigar with a nice glass of whiskey. The problem is, when I started out doing this, I quickly discovered that not every pairing was complimentary. In fact, I've actually ruined great cigars and great glasses of whiskey by making the wrong choices. Today, we are taking a field trip to the Cigar Dojo studios to ask the most legitimate source of cigar information on the entire internet how to properly pair a cigar with a glass of whiskey.
I am Eric, aka Master Sensei of Cigar Dojo.
I'm Jordan, also of Cigar Dojo, aka Sumatra Samurai.
So for the first whiskey today we're going to be talking about is going to be a low-proof bourbon. Right here we've got Woodford Reserve Double Oaked, and they've each chosen a cigar that is going to complement the flavors of this whiskey. Eric, what do you got?
All right, there's a lot of ways we could have attacked this topic. We decided to attack it going by country. For the low-proof bourbon, Jordan and I have selected the Dominican Republic, which tends to give a lighter, nuttier sort of flavor to cigars. It's kind of known for that. And so I am going with the new Davidoff Lancero, which I think will have a nice, light, nutty characteristic on that Ecuadorian Connecticut wrapped cigar.
So I went with the Arturo Fuente Casa Cuba. Still in the milder kind of range, but with a little bit, this one's gonna probably take the lead on the pairing. So Dominican cigars are often known for milder, sort of floral, sometimes nutty kind of characteristics. I thought that would pair well with the low proof bourbon.
One thing you don't want to do with bourbon and cigars is with your sort of like more complex, subtle notes of a cigar is overrun them with a strong bourbon. So these would pair perfectly with a lower proof.
Now for whiskey number 2, we're going to be going with a high proof bourbon. In this case, we've got Elijah Craig Barrel Proof. Now guys, how would you approach a whiskey like this?
First off, Connor, I'm gonna pour myself some of this high proof bourbon because I am smoking a cigar that is picked for this particular combination. So we're going America on this one. Now, this is Connecticut broadleaf. So it's grown in the Connecticut Valley, in Connecticut. It's full, strong, full body. It should match up and pair nicely with the strong bourbon and not get lost in the pairing. I also have, another example could be Liga Privada number 9. This particular one here is the H99, which Connor's also smoking. But the Connecticut broadleafs, the strong cigars with full body should pair nicely with the bourbon.
So I've got the Tabernacle from Nick Melillo and the Foundation Cigar Company. You could wrap Connecticut broadleaf, of course, over a Dominican cigar or a Nicaraguan cigar. Usually, I think for this pairing, the broadleaf over a Nicaraguan filler is going to go well because Nicaragua is kind of known for the more high-intensity tobaccos. The broadleaf's going to add some grittiness. Oftentimes, I'll even get like toasted oak kind of characteristics with the broadleaf, which of course, go well with the bourbon. I think it's going to be a nice, intense pairing. Now, so this is a Connecticut broadleaf wrapper.
Oh yeah, I would explain that.
So broadleaf, Connecticut and Connecticut broadleaf both come out of Connecticut, of course. Typically, when people talk about Connecticut's, that's like that's like as light as it gets. Very mild. That would not go well with this bourbon. The cigar would just be completely overrun. But if you go to broadleaf, that's the complete opposite end of the spectrum. That's the Maduro, dark, gritty. It's got all the flavor, all the intensity to match up with this bourbon.
So for whiskey number 3, we're going to be going with a wheated bourbon. And for this example, we're using a Maker's Mark Barrel Select. All Makers uses the same mash bill, which is a high wheat mash bill. Now guys, what would you pair with a whiskey like this?
All right, so a wheated bourbon I think is sort of like one that could go with almost anything. It's one of my favorite styles. We decided to go to Honduras and pick up a little bit of the salty notes from the Corojo tobacco. This here is the Camacho Diploma Series. Absolutely fantastic cigar. It's going to actually have some salty notes on not just the tobacco that you're smoking, but literally on your tongue, you'll get a little bit of that salty notes. You pair that with the sweetness in the wheated bourbon, makes for a beautiful, sweet, salty combination.
For my pairing, I went with the Aladino Classic. Similar kind of approach, a lot of Corojo tobaccos in here. I think this one has a Habano wrapper. But, Honduras, you're just heading north of Nicaragua. Nicaragua's got the spicy, fiery kind of elements to it, but Honduras kind of pulls back, more sweet earth. I always get like a lot of baked kind of even pretzel dough or like pastry kind of flavors, which I think pairs perfectly with wheat.
So in general, would you say there's the difference in regions is climate-based or it's soil-based? The nutrients kind of affects that flavor profile differently, or is there a different process that they use?
It's mainly the climate, but the soil is probably the number one factor in what makes it different. Process it pretty much the same for the most part in every country. So it's the terroir.
Terroir.
Yeah. The soils are different. It's very close to Nicaragua, but yet Honduran tobacco typically is a lot more earthy, whereas Nicaraguan tobacco is a lot more spicy.
Then what would you say to somebody, a lot of people getting into cigars will be overwhelmed and say it kind of blows out their palate. They can taste a cigar for the next several days and you can't get all the flavor notes of the whiskey when you're smoking a cigar. What would you say to that?
You might want to pull back on intensity. A lot of times guys are just not used to smoking as much, and so that's a common thing when you're getting into cigars. So if you run into that, usually just pull back on the strength. Maybe you need to go into the Connecticut realm of cigars for a little bit longer.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If you're experiencing sort of like palate fatigue, if you will, you may want to dial it down a little bit. Now, I think bourbon is a great palate cleanser, not only a great pairing, but also a great palate cleanser because it has so much going on with it. I think that if you're just smoking cigars with just like water or soda water, something like that, you could maybe experience that more than if you had like a bourbon or even like a mojito, something with some citrus in.
So for whiskey number 4, we've got a rye whiskey. So this is going to be over 51% rye in the mash bill, and there's going to be a lot more spice, floral notes in a rye whiskey than that sweet caramely notes that you're used to in a traditional bourbon. So guys, how would you approach a whiskey like this?
So for rye, which is spicy, we went right to Nicaragua, which is known for their spicy tobaccos. I am going with the brand new Aganorsa leaf Rare Leaf Maduro. Now this one happens to be a little bit more milky chocolate than some. Jordan's example will be a lot more on the spicy side, but Nicaragua is known for big, bold flavors that can stand up to this rye. Plus, it has the spice, which also goes well with the rye. So that's why Nicaragua seems to be the perfect choice for origin for cigars to go with a rye.
So for my pairing, I went with the Nicaraguan staple. Hoya de Nicaragua is the oldest factory in Nicaragua. With the 1970 Antaño cigar, this was like one of the first like full-bodied cigars that kind of revolutionized the style that we now enjoy as like the fuller-bodied cigars. So this thing has got a lot of like higher priming tobaccos, which that's where the strength's at. I think with the rye, I'm going for like a complementary pairing. Why not just do spice with spice? So the 1970 Antaño's got like cocoa, leather, but it also has more of a fiery element to it that I think really gonna bring out the rye spice in the drink.
Pro tip, you wanna have some fun with the cigar and whiskey. So if you smoke cigars often, you know what retrohaling means, which is where you breathe some of the smoke out of your nose instead of your mouth, which gives you a lot more ability to taste the flavors. What I like to do is take a little drink of my bourbon, leave some of it in the reservoirs of my mouth, then take a draw on the cigar, retrohaling both together. It's a pro tip.
It's getting too crazy.
So you can find us at cigardojo.com. That's where we do cigar reviews, cigar news, and much more. But the real exciting part is dojoverse.com, which is a social community for cigar smokers and folks that love fine drinks as well. That's dojoverse.com. Works on your phone just like an app. Tons of fun. We have a podcast on Wednesday night called Flavor Odyssey where we do pairings kind of like this right now. And then we have our big show on Friday nights, which is Smoke Night Live every Friday night.
Now that you guys know how to pair your cigars with whiskey like a pro, you're probably wondering, Connor, what whiskey should I buy? Click on this video right here. This is 5 bourbons to build your bourbon bar for $250.